In a small diner on the edge of town, life moved at its own pace. The air smelled of fried onions and fresh coffee, and the clatter of plates mixed with chatter from customers. It was a place where people came not just for food but for warmth, both in meals and in moments. For one young waitress, however, the warmth often felt distant. This waitress had been working there for years. She wasn't new to the job, but every day brought its own set of challenges. Her uniform was always clean, her smile bright, even when her feet hurt or her stomach growled because she hadn't eaten since breakfast. Behind that smile, though, was someone carrying more than most could imagine. Every morning she woke up before sunrise. After throwing on an old sweater and tying her hair back, she made sure her mom, who was sick and needed constant care, was comfortable. Then she rushed out the door, catching the bus to work. By noon, she'd already been awake for hours, juggling responsibilities no one else saw. Her second job started late at night, after her shift at the diner ended, which meant sleep was something she rarely got enough of. On this particular day, things seemed tougher than usual. The diner was packed, trucks lined up outside, families squeezed into booths, and businessmen tapping their fingers impatiently as they waited for their orders. The kitchen staff shouted over each other, trying to keep up, while waitstaff darted around like ants under pressure. Every table she served added another task to her mental list: refill drinks, take orders, deliver checks, clean spills. It never stopped. By mid-afternoon, the strain began showing. A cup of coffee slipped from her tray, spilling onto a customer's lap. Apologizing profusely, she quickly grabbed napkins to help clean up. The man scowled but accepted her apology. Minutes later, another customer complained about his burger being cold. She apologized again, rushing it back to the kitchen. Each mistake piled onto the last, making her feel smaller and smaller. Finally, during a brief lull, she found herself alone in the kitchen. The noise faded slightly, replaced by the hum of the refrigerator and the sizzle of frying pans. Leaning against the counter, she closed her eyes for a moment, hoping to catch her breath. But instead of relief, tears welled up. They spilled down her cheeks silently at first, then turned into quiet sobs. Sliding down to sit on the floor, she buried her face in her hands. All the stress, the long hours, the bills, the worry about her mom, it all came crashing down at once. She didn't notice him standing nearby until he cleared his throat softly. Startled, she looked up, wiping her face hurriedly. Standing there was a man she recognized vaguely. He'd been helping out at the diner for the past week, blending in with the rest of the staff. Everyone called him Mike. He worked quietly, doing odd jobs without complaint, and seemed friendly enough. But now seeing him here, watching her break down, filled her with embarrassment. "Hey," he said gently, crouching beside her. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, avoiding his gaze. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her red eyes told a different story. "No, you're not," he replied simply. "And that's okay. Sometimes we all need a minute." For some reason, his words broke through her defenses. Maybe it was the kindness in his tone or the fact that someone finally noticed how hard she was struggling. Whatever it was, she found herself opening up. Between sniffles, she told him about her mom's medical expenses, her second job, and how tired she felt all the time. She admitted she sometimes skipped meals so she could save money for rent. As she spoke, she expected pity or awkward silence. But what she got was understanding. When she finished, he stood up and extended a hand. "Come on," he said with a small smile. "Let me buy you lunch." At first, she hesitated. Taking charity wasn't something she liked doing, but there was something genuine about him, something that made her trust him. So, reluctantly, she took his hand and let him lead her to a quiet corner booth. As they sat together, sharing burgers and fries, he listened intently. He asked questions, not probing ones, but thoughtful ones that showed he cared. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt seen, not just as a waitress running around with plates, but as a person with dreams and struggles. And though she didn't know it yet, this simple act of listening would change everything, for her, for the diner, and for the company behind it all. The booth they sat in was tucked away in a quiet corner of the diner, far from the chaos of the lunch rush. It was one of those rare spots where you could actually hear yourself think. The waitress hesitated at first, unsure if she should even be sitting there. She wasn't used to taking breaks, let alone sharing a meal with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her life. But Mike, as everyone knew him, had a way of putting people at ease. His calm demeanor and steady gaze made her feel like it was okay, just this once, to let her guard down. As they ate, he didn't push her to talk right away. Instead, he started with small things. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, casually biting into his burger. "Almost 4 years now," she replied, picking at her fries. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." He nodded thoughtfully. "Doesn't seem easy, though. From what I've seen, you guys are running nonstop." She laughed bitterly. "That's one way to put it. Some days it feels like I'm juggling 10 things at once, and every time I drop one, someone gets mad about it." Her words hung in the air for a moment before she added softly, "But I can't complain too much. I need this job." Mike leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "Why do you say that? You don't owe anyone an explanation for feeling overwhelmed." His comment caught her off guard. No one had ever said something like that to her, at least not in a long time. Most people either told her to toughen up or brushed off her struggles as part of life. But Mike wasn't dismissing her feelings. He was acknowledging them, validating them, and that made all the difference. Encouraged by his response, she opened up further. She talked about how hard it was balancing 2 jobs while caring for her mom, who relied on her completely. She explained how medical bills piled up faster than she could pay them off, no matter how many extra shifts she took. She shared how exhausting it was to wake up early, stay late, and still come home to more responsibilities waiting for her. "I just want to make things better for my mom," she said quietly, staring at her plate. "But sometimes it feels impossible. Like no matter how hard I try, I'm stuck." Mike listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finally paused, he spoke carefully. "You're doing more than most people would in your situation. Don't sell yourself short." She shrugged, unconvinced. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just fooling myself thinking I'll ever get ahead." "What does getting ahead look like for you?" he asked after a moment. The question surprised her. No one had ever asked her that, at least not in a way that felt real. After thinking for a bit, she admitted, "I've always wanted to go back to school, become a nurse, help people the way others helped my mom when she got sick." Her voice cracked slightly as she continued, "But between work and everything else, it feels like a dream I'll never reach." Mike didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, studying her face. There was something about the way she spoke, her determination mixed with vulnerability, that struck a chord deep within him. He'd spent the past week working undercover in this diner, observing employees and learning firsthand about their lives. What he saw amazed him. Ordinary people doing extraordinary work under immense pressure. And yet, despite their efforts, many felt invisible, undervalued, and trapped. For a brief moment, guilt washed over him. As the CEO of the company that owned this chain of diners, he realized how disconnected he'd been from the reality of his employees' lives. Sure, he read reports and attended meetings, but numbers on paper couldn't capture the weight these individuals carried daily. Sitting across from this waitress now, hearing her story, he understood the importance of truly listening, not just to complaints or suggestions, but to the human experiences behind them. After a pause, he said gently, "That dream of yours, it's not out of reach. It might take time, but you can get there. People like you inspire people like me." She looked at him skeptically. "You really believe that?" "Because most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." "I do believe it," he replied firmly. "And trust me, you're stronger than you think." They finished their meal talking about smaller things. Her favorite foods, the music she liked, little details that painted a fuller picture of who she was beyond her role as a waitress. By the end of the conversation, she felt lighter, as if a burden she'd been carrying for so long had shifted. even just a little. For the first time in ages, someone had seen her. Not just the uniform or the tired smile, but the person underneath. When they stood up to leave, Mike placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for sharing your story with me," he said sincerely. "It means a lot." She smiled faintly, still unsure why he cared so much, but grateful nonetheless. "Thanks for listening, not many people do." With that, they parted ways. She returned to her tables, refilling drinks and taking orders while he went back to helping out around the diner. To anyone watching, nothing seemed unusual. Just another busy day at a roadside eatery. But beneath the surface, something significant had shifted. For both of them. Later that night, as Mike sat alone in his hotel room, he couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. The waitress's words echoed in his mind, stirring emotions he hadn't expected. He picked up his phone and scrolled through emails and notes from the past week, reflecting on everything he'd learned during his undercover stint. Each interaction, each struggle he witnessed reinforced a growing realization. The system wasn't working the way it should. He grabbed a notebook and began jotting down ideas. Ideas about scholarships, wage increases, and better benefits. Ideas about creating opportunities for people like the waitress, not just to survive, but to thrive. As he wrote, a sense of purpose filled him. This wasn't just about improving employee satisfaction anymore. It was about changing lives. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he knew exactly where to start. The next morning, the diner buzzed with its usual energy. The clinking of plates, the hiss of the grill, and the chatter of customers created a symphony of sounds that filled the air. It was early, but already the staff was in full swing, moving, like clockwork to keep up with the breakfast rush. For the waitress, it was just another day. Except for one thing. She couldn't shake the memory of her conversation with Mike from the day before. As she moved between tables, balancing trays, laden with pancakes and coffee mugs, her mind kept drifting back to their talk. She replayed his words over and over in her head. "That dream of yours. It's not out of reach." At the time, she dismissed them as kind but unrealistic. Dreams didn't come true for people like her, did they? Yet, there was something about the way he said it, so confident, so sure, that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, he believed it. Mike, meanwhile, was busy blending into the background as usual. He wiped down counters, restocked napkins, and helped carry trays when things got hectic. But today he seemed more observant than ever. He watched how the staff interacted, not just with customers, but with each other. He noticed the tired smiles exchanged between coworkers, the quick jokes shared during brief lulls, and the unspoken understanding that they were all in this together. He also saw the cracks beneath the surface, the exhaustion etched into their faces, the frustration when orders went wrong, and the quiet resignation that came with knowing there wasn't much room for change. By late morning, the manager called everyone into the break room for an impromptu meeting. The staff groaned under their breath. Meetings usually meant bad news or extra tasks being piled onto their plates. Reluctantly, they filed in, some still holding dirty dishes or half-empty pitchers of soda. When Mike walked in behind them, dressed in a crisp suit instead of his usual apron, murmurs rippled through the room. Who was that guy? Wait, isn't that Mike? Before anyone could ask more questions, Mike stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Good morning, everyone, he began, his voice calm but firm. My name is Michael Langley, and I'm the CEO of Langley Enterprises, the company that owns this chain of diners. The room fell silent. A few jaws dropped. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. No one had suspected that the quiet, unassuming man who'd been working alongside them for the past week was actually the boss. For the past several days, Michael continued, I've been undercover here, learning what it's really like to work in one of our locations. I wanted to understand your challenges, hear your stories, and see firsthand how we can improve as a company. He paused, letting his words sink in. The staff looked at him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Some crossed their arms, waiting to hear what he'd say next. Others leaned forward, intrigued by the unexpected turn of events. I want to be honest with you, Michael said, his tone softening. What I've seen has been eye-opening. You all work incredibly hard, often under difficult circumstances, and yet many of you feel unsupported, undervalued, or stuck. That stops now. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. One of the cooks raised his hand hesitantly. What do you mean, stops now? Michael smiled faintly. I mean exactly that. Starting immediately, we're making changes across the board. First, wages will increase by 20% for all employees. Second, we're expanding benefits packages to include better healthcare options and paid family leave. And third, he paused dramatically, scanning the room. We're launching a scholarship program specifically designed to help employees pursue further education. Gasps erupted. Whispers filled the air as the staff processed the announcement. Some looked stunned. Others grinned in disbelief. The waitress stood frozen, her heart pounding. Could this really be happening? To make this initiative personal, Michael added, turning toward her, I'd like to highlight someone who inspired these changes. He gestured for her to step forward. Reluctantly, she did, feeling every pair of eyes on her. This young woman, Michael said, his voice filled with admiration, has reminded me why I started this business in the first place. Her dedication, resilience, and compassion are qualities we should all strive to emulate. She dreams of becoming a nurse, and thanks to the new scholarship program, she'll have the opportunity to pursue that dream. Tears welled up in her eyes as applause broke out around the room. Co-workers patted her on the back, congratulating her even though they barely knew the full story. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not just as a cog in a machine, but as a person with potential. After the meeting ended, the staff returned to their duties, buzzing with excitement. Conversations revolved around the announcements, with everyone speculating about how the changes would impact their lives. The waitress, however, found herself struggling to focus. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she really go back to school? Was it finally within reach? Later that afternoon, during a rare quiet moment, Michael approached her again. How are you holding up? He asked gently. She shook her head, still overwhelmed. I don't even know where to begin. Think you feel so small compared to what you've done. You don't need to thank me, he replied sincerely. You earned this? All of you did. They talked for a while longer, discussing the logistics of the scholarship program and what steps she needed to take next. As they spoke, she realized something profound. Hope wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was tangible, real, and within her grasp. That evening, as she clocked out and headed home, she felt lighter than she had in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew that, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that brighter days might lie ahead. And somewhere deep inside, she resolved to make the most of this second chance, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her. Unbeknownst to her, Michael watched her leave, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He hadn't expected this undercover experience to affect him so deeply, but it had. Seeing the immediate impact of his decisions reinforced his belief that businesses could and should do more to uplift their employees. This was only the beginning. Months passed and life began to shift in ways the waitress could never have imagined. The changes Michael had announced weren't just empty promises. They were real, tangible actions that started reshaping the lives of everyone at the diner. For her, it meant more than just a bump in pay or expanded benefits. It meant an opportunity to dream again, something she hadn't allowed herself to do for years. The scholarship program rolled out quickly, designed to help employees pursue education without drowning in debt. Applications flooded in from workers across the company's locations. Some wanted to become nurses, others dreamed of teaching, and a few hoped to start their own businesses. The waitress was one of the first to apply. Filling out the forms felt surreal. Each question made her pause, forcing her to confront doubts she'd buried deep inside. Could she really handle school on top of everything else? What if she failed? But then she remembered Michael's words. It might take time, but you can get there. Those words became her anchor, pushing her to keep going. When the acceptance letter arrived, she read it 3 times before it sank in. She had been chosen as one of the inaugural recipients. Her hands trembled as she held the envelope, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that someone believed in her, that her hard work mattered. That night, she called her mom to share the news. Her mom cried too, pride radiating through every word. "You've earned this," she said softly. "Now go show them what you're made of." Juggling 2 jobs, caregiving, and now school wasn't easy. Some days felt impossible. Early mornings turned into late nights spent studying anatomy textbooks or practicing medical terminology flashcards during breaks at the diner. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when self-doubt crept in and whispered that maybe she wasn't cut out for this after all. But each time she wavered, she remembered the faces of her co-workers cheering her on, the customers who tipped generously because they knew how hard she worked, and Michael's steady encouragement whenever their paths crossed. Michael, meanwhile, continued visiting different branches of his company, determined to see the impact of the changes firsthand. He didn't stop at wage increases or scholarships. He implemented new training programs, improved working conditions, and created open forums where employees could voice concerns directly to management. These initiatives transformed not just individual lives but entire teams. Morale soared, productivity skyrocketed, and customer satisfaction reached record highs. People took pride in their work because they finally felt valued. One evening, while grading assignments late at night, the waitress received a call from Michael. She hadn't expected to hear from him outside of chance encounters at the diner. Picking up the phone, she braced herself, wondering if something was wrong. "How are classes going?" he asked warmly, cutting straight to the point. She hesitated, unsure whether to admit how tough things were. "They're challenging," she said carefully, "but I'm learning so much. It's amazing." "That's great to hear," he replied, his tone genuine. "I know it's not easy, but you're proving something important, not just to yourself but to everyone watching." His words struck a chord. Until then, she hadn't considered how her journey might inspire others. Sure, her co-workers often cheered her on, but she hadn't realized her efforts could ripple outward, touching people she'd never even met. The thought filled her with a newfound sense of purpose. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," Michael said simply, "by showing me what real strength looks like." Their conversation ended shortly after, but his words lingered long afterward. They reminded her why she kept pushing forward, even when the weight felt unbearable. Strength wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about showing up day after day despite the odds. As months turned into years, the transformation became undeniable. The waitress graduated near the top of her class, earning accolades from professors and peers alike. On graduation day, she stood tall in her cap and gown, clutching her diploma tightly as applause echoed around her. Among the crowd, she spotted Michael sitting proudly in the audience. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod, his expression saying more than words ever could. Afterward, they shared a hug, both overwhelmed with emotion. "You did it," Michael said, his voice thick with pride. "Look at you." "I couldn't have without you," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, you could have," he countered gently. "All I did was give you the tools. You're the one who built the house." Those words stayed with her long after the ceremony ended. Now a registered nurse, she dedicated her career to helping underserved communities, inspired by the compassion she'd experienced firsthand. She also became a mentor to others struggling to chase their dreams, paying forward the kindness shown to her. In her heart, she carried a simple truth: no act of generosity is too small to change a life. For Michael, the experience left an indelible mark. Returning to his office, he reflected on everything he'd witnessed during his undercover journey. Profit margins mattered, yes, but empowering people mattered more. Watching employees thrive reminded him why he'd started the business in the first place. Success wasn't measured by numbers alone. It was measured by the lives touched along the way. And so, the ripple effect continued. One decision, to listen, to care, to act, had sparked a chain reaction that reached far beyond what anyone could have predicted. It proved that sometimes the smallest gestures hold the greatest power. Years had passed since that fateful day in the diner, and life for the waitress-turned-nurse was unrecognizable from what it once was. The uniform she now wore wasn't stained with coffee spills or scented with fried food. It was crisp, clean scrubs that carried the faint smell of antiseptic. Her days were filled not with balancing trays but with tending to patients, listening to their stories and offering comfort when they needed it most. It was a world apart from where she'd started, yet every step of her journey remained etched in her heart. Becoming a nurse hadn't been easy, far from it. There were moments when the weight of responsibility felt crushing, when late-night study sessions blurred into early morning clinical rotations. But through it all, she held on to one truth: she wasn't alone. Every time doubt crept in, she remembered the people who had believed in her before she even believed in herself, the co-workers who cheered her on, the customers who tipped generously knowing her struggles, and Michael, whose quiet confidence had given her permission to dream again. Now, as she walked the halls of the community clinic where she worked, she saw reflections of her past in the faces of her patients. Many came from backgrounds similar to hers, hard-working individuals juggling multiple jobs, caring for loved ones, and trying to make ends meet. They reminded her of the woman she used to be, tired, overwhelmed, and unsure if there was a way out. That's why she made it her mission to go above and beyond for them. Whether it was staying late to explain treatment plans or connecting them with resources they didn't know existed, she poured her heart into helping others because she understood what it meant to need a hand up. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Patients often wrote heartfelt thank you notes praising her kindness and patience. Colleagues admired her work ethic and compassion, calling her an inspiration. But for her, the greatest reward wasn't recognition. It was knowing she was making a difference. Each smile she brought to someone's face, each burden she helped lighten, felt like proof that her struggles hadn't been in vain. Meanwhile, Michael continued his mission to uplift employees across the company. What began as a single scholarship program evolved into something much larger, a movement aimed at creating opportunities for everyone within the organization. He traveled extensively, visiting branches nationwide to ensure the changes were implemented effectively. Along the way, he met countless employees whose lives had been transformed by the initiatives. Some were pursuing degrees, others had started families thanks to improved benefits, and many simply expressed gratitude for finally feeling valued. But no matter how far his journey took him, he always kept tabs on the waitress who had sparked it all. Occasionally, he'd call to check in, asking about her progress and sharing updates about the company. Their conversations were warm and genuine, built on mutual respect and admiration. Over time, their bond deepened, not as CEO and employee, but as two people united by shared values and experiences. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the clinic, she received a text from Michael. "How's everything going?" it read. She smiled, appreciating the simplicity of his message. Replying quickly, she told him about her day, the challenges, the victories, and the moments that reminded her why she chose this path. Before signing off, she added, "Thanks again for everything. I hope you know how much your support means to me." His response came almost immediately. "The credit belongs entirely to you. You're living proof of what's possible when determination meets opportunity." Those words stayed with her long after their conversation ended. They weren't just kind, they were empowering. They reminded her that her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to dream despite the odds. As months turned into years, her impact rippled outward, touching lives in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Former co-workers reached out, inspired by her journey to pursue their own dreams. Some enrolled in school, while others found courage to speak up about workplace issues they'd previously ignored. Even strangers heard her story through interviews or features in local newspapers, finding solace in knowing they weren't alone in their struggles. For Michael, seeing these transformations reinforced his belief in the power of empathy and action. He realized that businesses weren't just engines of profit. They were communities capable of fostering growth, resilience, and hope. By prioritizing people over numbers, he'd created a culture where employees thrived, customers felt valued, and innovation flourished naturally. And though accolades poured in, from industry awards to glowing press coverage, he knew the true measure of success lay in the smiles of those whose lives had changed forever. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the waitress stood outside the same diner where her journey began. It had been renovated recently, sporting fresh paint and updated signage. Inside, laughter mingled with the clatter of plates, echoing familiar sounds she hadn't heard in years. Stepping through the door, she was greeted by cheers from former coworkers who rushed to hug her. For a moment, she felt transported back in time, to the chaos, the camaraderie, and the moments that shaped her into the person she was today. Among the crowd, she spotted Michael, standing quietly near the counter. When their eyes met, he smiled, warmly, nodding toward her as if to say, "Look how far you've come." She returned the gesture, silently acknowledging the role he'd played in her transformation. But more than anything, she felt gratitude for the hardships that taught her resilience, for the people who believed in her, and for the chance to pay it forward. Because in the end, life wasn't about escaping struggle. It was about using it to build something meaningful, and she had done exactly that. Years after her journey began, the waitress-turned-nurse found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. Life had taken her from a cramped diner kitchen to hospital corridors, from late-night study sessions in dimly lit rooms to inspiring others with her story. Yet despite all the changes, one thing remained constant: her gratitude for the people who had walked alongside her during the toughest times. She often thought about Michael and how his simple act of listening had set off a chain reaction that transformed not just her life but countless others. The scholarship program he started grew into something much bigger than anyone anticipated. Employees across the company's locations embraced it wholeheartedly, applying for opportunities to learn new skills, pursue higher education, or start businesses. Some became teachers, others engineers, and a few even opened their own restaurants. Each success story fueled more momentum, creating a culture where ambition wasn't seen as unrealistic. It was celebrated. The ripple effect reached families, communities, and industries beyond the company itself. For the waitress, seeing these transformations firsthand was humbling and exhilarating. She attended annual events hosted by Langley Enterprises where employees shared updates on their progress. At one such gathering, she listened to a young man recount how the scholarship allowed him to finish culinary school. He now worked as a head chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Another woman spoke tearfully about how financial assistance helped her care for her disabled child while completing her degree in social work. Every story reminded her of the power of opportunity and the importance of never underestimating someone's potential. Michael, too, continued evolving as a leader. His undercover experience taught him lessons no boardroom meeting ever could. He learned that success wasn't measured solely by profits or market share. It was measured by the lives touched along the way. Under his leadership, Langley Enterprises became known not just for its thriving business but for its commitment to uplifting its workforce. Competitors took notice, and some even adopted similar initiatives, sparking a wave of change throughout the industry. Despite his growing fame, Michael stayed grounded. He made it a point to visit various branches regularly, ensuring the programs he implemented were making a real difference. During these visits, he often crossed paths with the waitress, who had become a symbol of resilience within the company. Their conversations grew deeper over time, shifting from casual check-ins to discussions about purpose, legacy, and the future. They both agreed that true fulfillment came not from personal achievements but from empowering others to achieve theirs. One evening, after wrapping up a long day at the clinic, the waitress received an unexpected email from Michael. It contained an invitation to speak at a national conference hosted by Langley Enterprises. The event would bring together leaders from different sectors to discuss ways businesses could prioritize humanity alongside profitability. Reading the message, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Public speaking wasn't something she'd ever envisioned herself doing, but the idea of sharing her story with a wider audience intrigued her. She accepted the invitation, pouring hours into preparing her speech. She wanted it to be authentic, relatable, and impactful. On the day of the conference, standing backstage as speakers delivered their presentations, she felt butterflies fluttering in her stomach. But when her turn came, she stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and began. "I'm here today because I know what it's like to feel invisible," she said, her voice steady. "For years I worked tirelessly, hoping someone might notice the effort behind my smile. Then one day, someone did. That moment changed everything, not just for me, but for hundreds of others who followed." She went on to describe her struggles, the breakthroughs, and the lessons she'd learned along the way. She emphasized the importance of empathy, urging leaders to listen closely to the people they served. "When we see each other as humans first, beyond titles or roles, we unlock possibilities we never imagined," she concluded. "So let's keep building bridges, breaking barriers, and proving that kindness can move mountains." The room erupted in applause, many attendees rising to their feet. Afterward, strangers approached her, thanking her for putting words to feelings they'd struggled to articulate. Some shared their own stories, while others asked for advice on implementing similar programs in their organizations. For the first time, she fully grasped the magnitude of her influence. Backstage, Michael greeted her with a proud grin. "You nailed it," he said. "That was incredible." "Thanks," she replied, still processing the whirlwind of emotions. "But honestly, I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Stop selling yourself short," he teased gently. "You're the one who inspired all of this, don't forget that." Their friendship continued to flourish, rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Over coffee months later, they discussed expanding the scholarship program internationally, reaching workers in countries where opportunities were scarce. They dreamed big, knowing that every step forward mattered. As years passed, the waitress's impact extended beyond her profession. She became a mentor to aspiring nurses, wrote articles highlighting the intersection of healthcare and compassion, and advocated for policies supporting underserved communities. Her journey proved that transformation wasn't linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and beautiful. And through it all, she carried a simple truth. Kindness has a ripple effect, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. For Michael, the experience reshaped his vision of leadership. He retired eventually, leaving behind a legacy of innovation and humanity. In interviews, he credited the waitress for teaching him the value of truly seeing people, not as statistics or resources, but as individuals with dreams worth fighting. For in the end, their story wasn't just about one person helping another. It was about the power of connection, about how a single act of compassion could spark a movement, how listening could lead to action, and how believing in someone could change the world one life at a time. The years rolled by, and the bond between the waitress-turned-nurse and Michael only grew stronger. It wasn't just a professional connection, it was something deeper, a shared understanding of what it meant to care for others genuinely. Their relationship became a testament to the idea that kindness doesn't exist in isolation. It creates threads that weave through lives, connecting people in ways they never expect. One crisp spring morning, the nurse found herself standing outside a newly built community center. Its walls gleamed under the sunlight, adorned with banners celebrating its grand opening. This place was part of an initiative she had helped spearhead, a safe space where underserved families could access free healthcare services, educational workshops, and job training programs. The project was funded partly by Langley Enterprises, thanks to Michael's unwavering support. Walking inside, she felt a swell of pride as she looked around. Bright murals decorated the walls, depicting scenes of unity and hope. Kids played in one corner while adults browsed information booths set up by local organizations. Nurses bustled about, preparing for checkups and consultations. It was everything she had dreamed of when she first imagined giving back to her community. Michael arrived shortly after, his presence drawing warm smiles from everyone around. He greeted her with a hug, his eyes scanning the room with quiet satisfaction. "This is incredible," he said softly. "You've done so much." She shook her head, brushing off the compliment. "We did this together. None of it would have been possible without you." He chuckled, waving a hand dismissively. "I just wrote a check. You're the one who turned it into something meaningful." They spent the afternoon mingling with visitors, sharing stories, and learning firsthand how the center was already making a difference. One woman approached them, tears streaming down her face. She explained how the medical screenings had caught an issue early enough to treat it before it worsened. A young man thanked them for the career counseling session that landed him an internship at a tech company. Each story reinforced the impact of their efforts, filling both of them with renewed purpose. That evening, over dinner at a nearby cafe, they reflected on the day's events. The nurse stirred her coffee thoughtfully, her mind drifting to the countless lives touched by the center and all the work still left to do. "It feels good, doesn't it?" she asked, glancing at Michael. "Knowing we're helping people take control of their futures?" "It does," he agreed, leaning back in his chair. "But honestly, I think I've gained more from this journey than anyone else. Watching you grow, seeing the changes ripple outward, it reminds me why I started this company in the first place." She smiled, touched by his humility. "Well, maybe we're even then, because if it weren't for you, none of this would have happened." Their conversation shifted to plans for the future. They talked about expanding the scholarship program further, reaching rural areas where opportunities were scarce. They brainstormed ideas for additional initiatives, mentoring programs for teenagers, affordable housing projects, and partnerships with schools to encourage STEM education. Every idea sparked excitement, fueling their determination to keep pushing boundaries. As time went on, the nurse continued balancing her roles as a caregiver, advocate, and mentor. Her days were long but fulfilling. She often stayed late at the clinic, ensuring patients received the attention they needed. On weekends, she volunteered at the community center, teaching health workshops or organizing fundraisers. Despite the demands, she never felt overwhelmed. Not anymore. Knowing she was contributing to something bigger gave her strength. Meanwhile, Michael remained active in his philanthropic endeavors, using his influence to inspire other leaders to adopt similar practices. He traveled extensively, speaking at conferences and meeting with CEOs eager to learn from his experiences. Yet, no matter how busy life got, he always made time for the nurse. Whether it was a quick phone call to check in or a visit during one of his trips, their friendship remained steadfast. One winter evening, as snow blanketed the streets, the nurse received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was a framed photograph taken at the community center's opening day. Beneath it, Michael had written a note. "To my friend, the heart behind the change, thank you for reminding me what truly matters." Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the words. She placed the frame on her mantel, next to pictures of her mom and graduation day. Looking at it, she realized how far they'd both come since that fateful day in the diner. What began as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a lifelong partnership dedicated to uplifting others. Years later, when asked about her greatest accomplishment, she didn't hesitate. "It's not any one thing," she said, smiling warmly. "It's knowing that I played a part in creating opportunities for people who thought they didn't have any. That's what keeps me going." For Michael, the answer was equally clear. "My proudest moment was realizing that success isn't about numbers. It's about people. And I owe that lesson to someone who taught me to see beyond the surface." Together, they proved that compassion has no limits. That one decision, to listen, to care, to act, can spark a movement capable of transforming lives across generations. Their story wasn't just theirs alone. It belonged to every person who dared to believe in a better tomorrow. And in doing so, they reminded the world of a timeless truth. When we lift each other up, we rise higher than we ever thought possible.